feel like this video has been a long time coming. Okay, so in case you don't know, my name is Shay Parker, and I started RTFM several years ago at this point because I wanted to teach Twilight Imperium, 3rd edition, specifically, not this one, this is 4th edition, 3rd edition's back there. Anyway, so I taught Twilight Imperium, and then RTFM just kind of grew from there in a way that was unexpected, but that I'm very proud of. Of course, I'm still connected in a lot of people's minds to Twilight Imperium, which I don't mind at all. I love Twilight Imperium. It's one of my favorite games, but it also means that I get to hear about it every time someone compares Twilight Imperium to Eclipse. Sometimes the comparisons are favorable, sometimes not. But what gets thrown around the most is this idea that Eclipse is a Euro TI. So before we get into the rest of this video, I want to cover the big question of, is that even true? No. Okay, sure, yes, they are both similar. They have a similar setting, at least. It's space. You're aliens on different sides of a big hexagonal map, and there's something cool at the center of the galaxy. Yeah, you settle planets, you research technologies, you get in cool space fights, but all of that stuff is just surface level. Really, I mean, when you sit down to actually play both of these games, you very quickly realize that the experience is completely different. So I don't say that Eclipse is a Euro TI. Not only because I think it's a little bit misleading, but also because I think it does a disservice to Eclipse. This game should stand out on its own as a very good game. It shouldn't have to be compared to TI for people to be interested. That being said, I'm about to compare the two games. And while I will have a verdict at the end of it, at the end of this video, it's not like I'm trying to say that one of these games is empirically better than the other. I'm mostly just talking about my personal preferences and how I come down on a few different points. So, let's get started. I'm kicking things off with a bit of a softball here because there is no question that Eclipse is easier to get to the table than Twilight Imperium. It's less complicated than TI, which means it's easier to teach. You can play Eclipse with just 2 players, whereas Twilight Imperium you need at least 3, though let's be honest, that number should really be 4. And it doesn't take literally all day to play. Now I know there are people out there who can play Twilight Imperium in 6 hours. I am not one of them, and Eclipse still plays in half that time. Now, I don't have a problem with the complexity, player count, or length of TI, but because accessibility is important to me, I have to give this one to Eclipse. Okay, this is going to be a little bit tougher because these two games have a very different design philosophy when it comes to combat. Because Eclipse encourages fights by rewarding both the winner and the loser with victory points, you're going to see fights more often and earlier in the game than you do in TI, where you often have long cold wars that culminate in a few big battles. There's also a much bigger focus on customization of your ships in Eclipse, which is important because you only have 3 ships to work with. Twilight Imperium has 7 ships, so the customization there is more on your fleet. You can upgrade ships, it's a simpler process, but choosing which ships to upgrade is a very important decision. So, combat in TI is also much more straightforward than it is in Eclipse, and I think it's more streamlined too, in my opinion. One of the few instances of a system in Eclipse being, in my opinion, a little too fiddly is the combat initiative and ordering system. I don't know, I kind of just like in Twilight Imperium where it's my ships and it's your ships, and we're going to duke it out, and we'll see how it goes. And yes, there is a little bit more to it than that, but that often is how it plays out. And I don't mind that. With how complex the rest of it is, I like that ends up being kind of simple. So, it's a hard one, and it's going to come down to personal preference. I lean towards Twilight Imperium because I like having fewer fights that are just more meaningful. But I totally understand why the tactical, smaller scale fights of Eclipse are going to be more appealing for some. This is another example of 2 completely different design philosophies. In Twilight Imperium, each planet gives you resources and/or influence, and you have to decide how you want to spend it. Resources get you ships and technologies. Influence can get you command tokens, which are used for taking more actions, fielding a bigger fleet, or using different special actions. But influence is also votes in the agenda phase. So as you can see, everything has more than one use, and it's all connected. Eclipse is much more segmented with its economy. You've got 3 different types of resources. There's money, science, and materials. Money is actions, but also lets you control more of the galaxy. Science gets you technology, and materials get you ships. The strategy in that ends up being choosing which sectors you're going for, and also deciding how long you want to stockpile something before you spend all your money. So it's another toss-up. But I'm going to go for Eclipse on this one because while I really do like the interconnected economies of Twilight Imperium, the directness of Eclipse, it's easier for me to latch onto. Plus, I really like that if you can't afford something right away, you can hold on to your money for a round or two, and then maybe you will be able to afford it. It's a lot harder to do that in TI. In Eclipse, player interaction is mostly combat, but also jockeying for control of the map, grabbing important technologies before someone else gets them, and occasionally engaging in a bit of diplomacy. In Twilight Imperium, everything you do is player interaction. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but not much. The most I care about what other players are doing in Eclipse is when I'm looking at their player board to see how strong they are because I maybe want to fight them. In Twilight Imperium, diplomacy is baked into the game. Like from the very beginning, when you're just putting down map tiles, you're already causing problems for other people and making pre-game alliances and wars in your head. During the game, you can trade with other players, make soft alliances, and work together or not on political agendas. Every aspect of player interaction in Eclipse happens in Twilight Imperium in a more meaningful way. So for me, this is an easy win for TI. This is obviously going to be a bit subjective, but I do think that it's a fair assessment to say that there is more flavor in Twilight Imperium than Eclipse. I mean, yes, there is background information on the 6 different factions that you can play in Eclipse, but there's a deeper story on the 17 different factions that you can play in Twilight Imperium. And in a gameplay sense, each of the factions in Twilight Imperium feels so distinct from each other that when they interact in-game, it makes for a completely different story every time you play. The factions in Eclipse, in my opinion, all kind of feel like variations on the standard human model, with one exception. I'd say the Descendants of Orion do feel pretty distinct from the others because they have the completely different rule of you can get along with alien NPCs as opposed to fighting them. But with that exception, everything else just kind of feels very similar. Now, just because Eclipse has a milder flavor than TI doesn't necessarily mean that it's worse. I totally get why Twilight Imperium might be overpowering for some, but if you can handle the spice, I think there's a lot more to sink your teeth into here. Man, I was hungry when I wrote this. And now, if I'm being honest, but anyway, yeah, Twilight Imperium is the winner for me, obviously, but I do want to give a special shout out, honorable mention to the different ship sculpts for every faction in Eclipse. The designers clearly put a lot of work into that, and some of those ships look really, really cool. Some of them don't, and I'm gonna get more into that in a video next week. So with all that in mind, it may not be any big surprise, but yes, Twilight Imperium is the winner for me. However, as I've said from the very beginning, these are 2 very different games, and I would gladly play either of them. Eclipse for being such a tight economic war game, Twilight Imperium for being a grand sprawling epic. Both of them have a space in my heart. But that is not the end of the discussion. What do you think? I know y'all got opinions and I want to hear about them in the comments below. Just, be nice about it. Bye.